Welcome to this initial presentation for EAL 202 Developing Applied Learning Strategies in Discipline. The first part of this presentation will be common to all of my units from here on in. Thereafter, the second part will be varied to fit the unit situation. This first slide lists the intended learning outcomes for this unit. They're what you expect to be able to do at the end of the 13 weeks of the semester. They're important for me as a lecturer because they're where I started this unit build. Before anything, I had to decide the unit objectives. At that time, they were draft and they've been modified to the final refined form you see before you. These learning outcomes are where you also should start the unit. I've been concerned in the past that some students go heading into the content or the assessment task without having a really good idea of what they're doing in the unit. These learning outcomes are in the unit outline, but it can be easy to overlook them as one seeks to find out what will be happening in the unit itself. Well, from now on in, expect them to be right there up the front and re-quoted to you on numerous occasions. Because you are education students, it's professionally important that you know the educational logic behind what I'm doing here. The term constructive alignment was developed by John Biggs, a Tasmanian and UTAS graduate. The concept isn't rocket science and thus elegant in its simplicity and application. Biggs argues that for education to work, the intended learning outcomes, assessment, and teaching and learning activities need to be mutually self-supporting, just like a tripod. It's no use assessing something that hasn't been taught or that's outside the scope of the unit. Similarly, introducing topics that have nothing to do with the outcomes or assessment just don't make sense. The term used for the latter is curriculum drift. This is where lecturers take the opportunity to inject their favourite topic into units because it's a favourite. They know about it and they want to push their own barrow. This applies not just to university studies. It's like putting short crust pastry assessment tasks into a lesson series on soups, or retaining wall construction techniques into a unit that's testing concrete slab skills. In a vet context, the weirdness can stick out like a sore thumb. In a uni student setting, it's where students ask, why are we listening to this lecture? Or when students put into evaluations that the assessment task had nothing to do with the unit. I find the best way of thinking of constructive alignment is of a three-legged stool. If just one leg is weak, one falls over. The stool simply cannot stand. The rather small screenshot you see before you is of a tool I've developed called UMAP. Essentially, it maps all the key elements of a unit from intended learning outcomes through assessment tasks, learning activities, professional teaching standards, and Australian Qualifications Framework outcomes. UMAP is appearing gradually in all of our units, and they should demonstrate to you that constructive alignment has actively been applied to the development or redevelopment of this unit. Consequently, all the bits should fit together all of the time. In a highly abbreviated format, this slide shows that learning outcomes 1, 3 and 4 are assessed through identifying an area of educational concern using the applied learning principles. Most specifically, the assessment task demands that you actively and effectively engage with the readings and the discussion boards in conducting your analysis. In particular, the assessment and teaching and learning activities represent a major change from the previous iteration of this unit. Because students had difficulties making the necessary connections, you in this unit will essentially draft your analysis in the discussion boards and then improve on these in your submission. The revised procedure should enhance your understanding, model and launch task 2, and help you better achieve the learning outcomes. If you wish to look at the detail further in UMAP, you'll find the link just after the one for this presentation. The next step after looking at the learning outcomes is to check the assessment. In this case, the Task 1 Plain English file in the Assessments folder. If you can make sense of the assessment task and bring it together with the learning outcomes, then you're in a position to actually get on into the topics in Module 1, and through active engagement with the discussions, either on the boards or in web rooms, contribute to achievement of the assessment. But before heading off too quickly, get hold of the rubrics, get familiar with them, and keep them by you as you progress through the learning activities and start orienting towards the assessment. The assessment criteria in the rubric align with the unit intended learning outcomes, whilst the descriptors in the rubric itself link in the learning activities. As the slide says, you should know the outcomes, understand and take ownership of the assessment, engage with the learning activities to construct your learning. What we're aiming for is a good, solid seat for our understanding.